This Tuesday, May 16th, residents of Los Angeles will vote on Charter Amendment C. The bill is being touted as reform by its supporters and a Trojan horse by its opposition. If passed, Charter Amendment C would alter the procedure for disciplining LAPD officers by allowing them the option of being judged by an all-civilian board. Currently, officers found guilty of indiscretion by the chief are then brought before the Board of Rights, a panel consisting of 2 senior officers and 1 civilian. The chief makes a determination as to how the officer should be punished, such as suspension, demotion, or termination. The board then makes a ruling on the case. The ruling is then sent back to the chief, who may opt for a lesser punishment but cannot exceed their punishment in severity. For instance, the chief cannot decide to terminate an officer after the board ruled for suspension. The current process of including civilians in the disciplinary process was first instituted in 1992 in an effort to increase civilian oversight following the Rodney King scandal. At the time, it was opposed by the police union. Since that time, it's been shown that civilians actually rule more leniently than their police counterparts. Critics of the bill claim that this bill, while posing as reform that would increase transparency, would actually just offer more leniency towards police misconduct. I got an opportunity to speak with Rob Harris, a representative of the Police Protective League, the police officers union for LAPD. He explained why he believes LA residents should vote yes on Charter Amendment C.
Well, Measure C does a couple of things. One, it increases the civilian oversight over the department. As everybody knows, the LAPD already has a robust civilian oversight system that's in place. And the other thing that Measure C will do is it helps eliminate the conflict that exists currently in the Board of Rights process, where you have command staff officers that are put in a position to make decisions about their colleagues' careers, or they have to overrule the recommendations of their boss, the chief of police. So at the end of the day, we're looking for a fair and impartial system, and we're looking to add the option of more civilian oversight.
Eric Aries is a deputy director for Los Angeles Community Action Network, or LACAN, a Skid Row advocacy group. They oppose the bill. He had this to say.
Sure. I think that we are very much opposed to Measure C for the following reasons, which is basically it's being passed off as accountability, is being passed off as an increase in civilian oversight, when it is quite the exact opposite. It is a very misleading ballot measure. It was introduced in a low turnout election for that purpose, to try to make people think that it's about oversight, when really it'll actually give officers who have already been found guilty of misconduct, right? The chief and people have already decided that the officer's been found guilty. It gives them actually more options to get out of actually being disciplined and being put back on the streets. And so we think it's particularly, nefarious to say that it's about community oversight or about accountability, when really it's about the Police Protective League, who is the only really primarily big supporter of this, to actually consolidate more power for cops who are dangerous in our communities for our residents.
Harris had this rebuttal.
So distortions of truth and lies don't make facts. Those facts are incorrect. I would counter and say it's a sad day when groups like that, or even the ACLU, don't support more civilian participation in the oversight of our police department. In regards to the leniency that they allude to, just to give you some statistics, over the last 6 years, there's been a unanimous vote for the board 91% of the time, and 83% of the time, officers have been found guilty of charges. Only 16 cases out of 229 had a split verdict. So we're not looking for more leniency. What we're looking for is an impartial and fair hearing. And I think everybody understands the bedrock principle of due process for people. And so what we are simply looking for is the due process rights for our officers, and having the option to appear before the all-civilian board. And it's something that the city council agrees with. It's something that Mayor Eric Garcetti agrees with. So this isn't a Trojan horse. This is simply to create a way for an all-civilian panel to be able to hear and evaluate both sides, and then make a recommendation and a determination.
Civilians are hired for the Board of Rights by the Police Commission. They must have at least 7 years arbitration experience, meaning many are either professional arbitrators or attorneys. Aries believes that in order to have true civilian oversight, the disciplinary process needs to involve a pool of people reflective of the larger community.
I think that, panels in which community residents from impacted communities are involved, making sure even if there is a limited pool, what does that pool look like? Is it representative of our communities? Is it poor people? Is it black people? Is it brown people? Or is the same basically retired officers or attorneys who, yes, there might be civilians theoretically, but do they really represent us? So there's any number of ways you can tackle the current structure. I think beyond Measure C, we'd like a whole different structure where the chief, the people who are responsible and pay, the officers aren't also responsible for deciding whether or not they are out of policy. Right. It just doesn't add up, and it's not going to lead to anything other than a dynamic when officers are always going to be favored.
The LA Times reported that community advocacy groups like LA CAN, the ACLU, and others were shut out from the drafting of this measure. I asked Eric about this.
Yeah, this stuff has been in the works for years, right? And we were shut out, community shut out, not unlike most processes. I think it really just highlights what we've been saying, which is on top of how bad this policy is, it really is a co-opting of all the stuff that we've been fighting for alongside of communities across the country, which is people saying police don't have accountability, civilians don't have real oversight or input into how their neighborhoods are policed. And so it just goes to show you that these folks have been having this basically on the back burner for some time, and now is the perfect time to use some deceptive messaging to say, hey, this is about what you guys want, right? This is about Black Lives Matter and about, don't you guys want oversight? And yes, we want oversight. Yes, we want accountability. We don't want something that is like a Trojan horse trying to make people think that it's about something when really it's about nothing. And then after this, they can be like, see, we gave you what you wanted, when this is quite the opposite. It's a very actually nuanced and pretty impressive strategy in their part, but it is completely false in what it's saying it's going to do.
The Police Protective League had this to say in retort.
Well, I think it's important to remember that Measure C has the ultimate transparency to it. It's going before the voters for their approval. There were months of public discussion as part of the campaign for this. There were multiple opportunities for public input. Peter from the ACLU actually showed up to one of those meetings. But at the end of the day, this was actually a labor issue. And the process for that by law is that labor unions meet with management and we try to come to a resolution. And once an agreement is reached, that's when it's brought out to the public. This happens every day in every city, every county up and down the state of California. The only difference here is that we're asking the voters to approve the agreement that we reached. So I would counter by saying that the whole point of this is transparency, and that's why it's going before the voters.
It has been speculated that Chief Charlie Beck is not in favor of this measure. He openly questioned the measure in a statement made by the LAPD, stating that there are several important concerns regarding the measure. The measure's supporters argue that Charter Amendment C would alleviate undue influence by the chief over the disciplinary process. They claim that high-ranking officers are pressured to make determinations in line with the chief, out of fear of possible retribution, such as being passed up for promotions.
At the end of the day, the labor union, the Los Angeles Police Protective League, we are more interested in what is better for our membership as a whole, what's more transparent, what's a discipline system that's fair and impartial. So what Chief Beck thinks about this process in a nutshell is mildly interesting to the labor union. So I don't know what he's publicly said, but his opinion doesn't really play a role in this as far as we're concerned.
Opponents argue that this measure is meant to take authority away from the chief and give it to the city council, which is under more influence by the highly powerful police union. In addition to LA CAN, Charter Amendment C is being opposed by the American Civil Liberties Union of Southern California, the South LA-based Community Coalition, and Black Lives Matter Los Angeles. It is supported by City Council President Herb Wesson and Mayor Eric Garcetti. Elections will be held on Tuesday, May 16th, and it is open to all residents of the city of Los Angeles.